Hi, everyone. Max is joining us by phone today, some technical issues. Thank you for waiting. Gonna let people filter in, and then I'm gonna let Max go ahead. So Max is just audio, so just you might need to pay special attention just to know that he's present. So there we go.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm the disembodied voice. I welcome you back to our series. And I will just remind everybody at the end, we'll have some time to talk. So just activate your mics at the end and speak up, and we'll be able to talk directly with Kamau, who I'm very pleased to welcome right now. Kamau Patton joins us from, I believe, Chicago. Kamau Patton is an interdisciplinary artist and educator. Patton first studied sociology at the University of Pennsylvania and then continued studies as a graduate student in art at Stanford University. His work examines history and culture through engagement with archives, documents, stories, and sites. I'll note that I listened to a short recording of Kamau recently speaking about the importance of an image discovered in a collection at the SF MoMA that depicts a handball player. And I'll say he's a compelling storyteller and an excavator of histories that weave his own with his larger cultural context. I personally first crossed paths with Kamau a few years ago when we were both working on projects at the Drawing Center in New York as part of their Open Sessions Laboratory. As I learned about his work and became more familiar with Kamau's project at that time, I was fascinated with the fluidity in which he moved among so many forms of production. In some of Patton's past projects, he's made use of helicopters, barges, and kites as platforms for performative radio and video transmission, yet redolent of non-site and land-based artists, the liveness and energy of his work in the field was retained in image-based work presented in the space of his exhibitions and in the form of photography, notation, video, audio installation, and other forms. Patton, more engaged with process than a distinct outcome, describes his works as temporary architectures made solid through attention, always becoming, continuing, and undergoing transformation. Patton is currently developing his project Tell, which questions how the nature of memory has changed with cyberspace and transmission. The project name refers to the archaeological term for a mound formed by the accumulated remains left by communities occupying a site over time. Kamau extensively has presented exhibitions of his artworks, research and performances, notably at numerous venues, including soundscape studies through the Mellon Elemental Arts Initiative here at UB, and the Tang Teaching Museum, as well as the Museum of Modern Art, the Getty Performance Festival, and a machine project in LA. Now we welcome Kamau Patton to UB. Kamau, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me? Yeah? Okay, there's a couple of nods. All right. Thank you very much, Max, for that generous introduction. So yeah, thank you for having me. You're talking about being a storyteller, and I just immediately had this rush of like, oh, okay, I'm looking at some things. I'm looking at my own story. For the first time, I mean, it's been like a reflective time recently, but so I guess I'm in the mode or in the habit of it, but this particular body of work is work that I hadn't thought about in some time until y'all reached out to me. I think it's a lot of it is what happens with the work, thinking back about it, thinking about making it and having made it. There's a kind of immediacy of like, all right, I'm gonna go somewhere, be somewhere, and initiate something without necessarily a clear sense of what the outcome is gonna be. And with a group of people that is prepared to work through that, as in like not knowing or not really needing to know what the outcome is in a professional context of like we're doing a museum or a gallery or something of consequence culturally, like looking back on culture, thinking back on culture or site. So a lot, this is like, it feels like all very, very immediate. And when the documents happen, and I'm gonna share a good deal of documentation with y'all tonight. For me, I often just like, I put it away, you know, and I just, and that's what it is. So this is, again, things that have been put away for a while. So let me, I guess, give a context for where this is going. And then we'll cycle back and think about where it started. Well, that's what I want to get to. So I'm going to share the screen. And let's go to slideshow. All right, so. Okay, yeah, my future X. That's how I ended up in Buffalo. An invitation to be in this thing called My Future X, which I thought was like, okay, that's bizarre name, but all right. Anyway, so Sandra Furman, who was at the gallery at the time, university, at Buffalo Art Galleries, set up this whole zone where I would come out there and like just like vibe on the place, like hang out, check out some of the sites, and come up with like a thing to do that would be like outside of the box ish, you know. And that the one like thing that I had to keep in mind, that like it had to happen on a barge, like there needed to be a barge involved. I was like, all right, that's cool, you know, that's a fine criteria. So there I am. You may see me September 21st. Kamau Patton sound mapping workshop in partnership with Squeaky Wheel, Buffalo Media Resources, 2 to 4 p.m. So, Young Voices, when did this all start? Yeah. So anyway, that was on the 20th, going through to pretty much the end of September. A bunch of programs. So there was this like sensor array jam session that we were just like making sensors and hanging out. Then there was the Young Voices workshop. And then there was Float My Resident, which was the what we're going to look at today, which was the thing that happened along the river, the Buffalo River. On this float was some dancers and from the dance department, and a bunch of musicians lined up along the side of the river, playing mostly brass, but some xylophone and whatnot. So anyway, you'll see documentation of how that happened, or you'll see documentation of the thing and some of the rehearsal for that. But this also will cycle back to like how that happened, or how I even got to be someone that they would consider to invite to this wonderful place. So here are some images from the exhibition. And I want to read this section. Yeah, okay, so at the birth of the 20th century, Buffalo, New York was the 8th largest city in the United States. The advent of the trucking industry and the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1957 rendered its ports obsolete and were pivotal factors in its long and brutal fall into depression. So yeah, things were like, and Buffalo, I guess, was questionably present. I'm gonna have a sip. So this is like I guess the long game, or like the bookends of the depth of history that I feel like the gallery and Sandra was trying to kind of engage or think about in terms of like putting together an exhibition. And this, maybe this statement here at the bottom puts into context like what was happening or what the institutional thinking was. So it's like today's art institutions are well aware that it is not enough to exhibit artwork solely in the galleries for a well-educated, mostly white audience. For our continued relevance, it is imperative that we extend and interact with an eclectic demographic range by decentralizing some programming towards the cultivation of meaningful relationships with local communities on their own turf. The UB Art Gallery Center for the Arts faces this challenge somewhat more acutely due to its location in the suburbs. Nestled within what is now a commuter school, the primary mission of the gallery is to serve the faculty and student body by presenting exhibitions that examine cultural and socio-political topics informing current art practice. Therefore, it needs to be responsive to a growing urgency amongst artists to engage those cultural and social political topics in the urban environment on its own terms, over and beyond the white cube. To introduce college students to this work, we thought it was necessary to invite them to explore the unique places where artists are working and open up opportunities to them to participate in the creation or interpretation of the artist's work on site. So this Silo City, again, there's those parks that are now there. That was like the site of where things were meant to happen. And when I got there, it wasn't really all that developed of an area. My understanding is it's a much more developed area now. So there's this kind of idea of like urban transformation, renewal, et cetera, et cetera. So, again, I want to like linger too much in this because I want to give some background as to like what I was doing at the time, you know, and to the extent that like really what happened here was that I was invited to a place to just be, you know, and listen, and then like help have a conversation about meeting certain goals. You know what I mean? And so I thought that was, I mean, I feel like that's a generous way of thinking about change and decision making and uses of resources for at a point of like research or at a point of inquiry of like trying to understand how a site would be like networked. And I guess the proof of that, or the idea of like the network ability of a site, is to have a stranger come and like and move about. And what does someone who has no sense of an infrastructure because of some like deep history or like deep understanding, like if you're from somewhere, there's like an understanding that's just like, maybe it's so ingrained in the wisdom of the places that you like know and are passed down that it's hard to be aware of like how opaque and how impermeable things are to those who are just encountering them. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't understand. You know what I mean? Well, you get to a place, and some places like reveal themselves and are easy to like enter and understand. And like, so yeah, inviting an artist or someone who are thinking, or someone who's like kind of going to be aware of that and help bear witness to that is like what was happening. I think, and that is something that I was, I guess, lucky enough to encounter as an actual form of a social practice in the arts, that prior to being invited to Buffalo, I was engaged in, kind of by like strange happenstance. But anyway, I had been working with people that were doing these, like, I guess, much more responsible thinking, independent gallery folks, you know. So this was like a machine project in Los Angeles. And so through the work with them, I think these connections seem to manifest and make sense. And I'll speak more about that. But anyway, here's an image of the project that I ended up doing along the river. This is me on one section of the barge. And these are images like from the event, or from a part of the event, the beginning of like just getting on the barge and leaving and going on this excursion from one end to the other. And this are some images from the performance that happened, or just one aspect of the performance. And this is what we'll kind of like focus on, because for me, this was like in addition to everything else that was going on, like first I had some notion that this is what I wanted to accomplish on the barge. I wanted to do this like dance performance sound thing. And I was like, that'll, like, it was like an aesthetic kind of interest, whatever. So anyway, here are the workshops and other things that were going on, but I'm gonna stop that share right now to do a little history. Where are we at? Cool. So, Vimeo. Do you have a Vimeo account? So most of the stuff that I'm going to show does live in various places on the internet. One place is Vimeo. So let's get to that. So I'm going to show a piece called Perfect Strangers. And this was a thing that I was invited to do as a part of Machine Project, which is a small, or was a small artist-run space in Echo Park, Silver Lake area of Los Angeles. And you know, there was a big community of artists that formed around Machine, and the Machine had a space and was do its own independent things. And I think that it became so popular and influential that larger institutions that wanted to do like larger exhibitions, performative exhibitions, more immediate things were attracted to what Machine Project was doing and began to invite Mark Allen, who was directing Machine, to bring his collective of people that he worked with to various sites to like engage. And most of it was really centered on this like questioning, this kind of mode where the institution was questioning itself or questioning building something new, questioning like how it would like engage with the public, right? So inviting these group of artists to just be there and engage and come up with like novel ways to like explore new terrain or new peoples and see what happens, you know. So this was this thing that happened at Colgate at college and in Hamilton, New York, called Perfect Strangers. And the idea was that they were going to build a new museum or like art center there. And it was like, well, what's the sense of it? How is the community going to respond? Like, so the question was like, who's already there and what's the histories there? You know, what would a contemporary art space look like, or that would resonate with those histories? So I went there as a part of this Perfect Strangers project to just like meet people and get stories and talk to people and explore and start to just gather some of this cultural history. So I'm going to show you this this piece to give you some context of the kind of work that I have been doing and how it kind of happened to end up at the university. And again, this is a piece that was hosted by a school, you know, a college that was interested in kind of a kind of artwork that was maybe research-based, that would engage its own kind of histories and archives and whatnot. So this is an engagement with the peoples there. So I'll, and also some of the buildings on site. And essentially what happened was just, I had one informant, one person that I met who you'll see in this first section. I think his name is Jack Shear, and he introduces me eventually to everyone else that I encounter in this piece. share for a second. Admit that. So here we are, Perfect Strangers, Jack Sheeran. It's just like, as the story goes, no one had been up here in some time, you know, so immediately it's like, what are you bringing to this kind of place, you know, that has such a history, you know, to encounter something so vast. And so on this trip was like, well, what do you bring with you to, you know, to like bear witness to anything that you might encounter along the way of this new bizarre and, well, strange, unusual place, where the question is to like show me something like that is relevant but maybe overlooked or not seen, you know. So
two hands. So I do it the same way.
yeah.
Coming, Joan? I don't think there's been more than 6 people who've ever been up here, so.
Yeah.
And when am I allowed to talk?
Yeah, you're totally allowed to talk.
When I was wiring for the electronic clock, I came up here and I had a work light, you know, one of those drop lights,
Yeah.
and I plugged it in and I left it on. And that night I drove around every place you can see, and you could see this light
Coming out of here.
So I proposed it to the board of trustees, and one guy said, "Oh, he thought the congregation wouldn't like having that extra expense or something." And Ann Leland was on the board, and she said, "I'll pay for the damn thing." And I said, "I'll wire it." So I put these lights up here, then the light down there that shines on the clock, and then the light in the, no, actually it's the back of the church.
Yeah.
And the stained glass windows, I illuminated those. So
Oh, wow.
at a certain time at night, all the lights come on. It's pretty. And once we did it, then everybody that was negative, of course, said, "Oh, that was my idea, wasn't it?" So every time they burn out, I'm the one that has to come up here.
Yeah.
It's like, so I got these LED lights that are supposed to last
They last a little bit longer.
30,000 hours or something. I figure I'll beat that when they go. And there's a bit of video too, so I'm gonna it for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, here we go. Sit down. Be my guest. Be our guest, rather. All right.
Doesn't have his order.
So I'm going to pause that. I'm not sure if I think I can be heard. Oliver, I see you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so so that's the First Baptist Church. That was Jack who took me to the top, to the clock tower, and just told me a story about like the work that he'd done there. His father had been the kind of caretaker of that church before him, and let's see, Colgate College, where this church is situated quite near to, that it was inside of. You know, having been there and having asked questions, and you know, there's things that kind of came to light about it that I didn't understand, didn't know about. So one thing is that Colgate College had, I guess, more presidents of historically Black colleges and universities had graduated from that college than anywhere else. You know, I was like, oh, okay, that's a trip. I didn't know that. You know, and in terms of women, Native American, I mean, just they were, I guess, quite, how do I say, considered in their approach of how to promote an ethical society, and yeah, and to kind of question and think through what those ethics are, how they're formed, and like how are people affected by them. So I found it to be, as I say, quite a progressive place in a lot of ways, in terms of like what does one even think about, and how do you create some space for thinking about that idea? How do you like actualize it, right? Because this was like articulations of. So that church as an articulation of a moment, the bell, the organ, and that's like, I just walked into that place. Do you know what I mean? And so it was like, here, and this is an archive, and this is like a thing to explore. So as I was moving through there, all these other archives that I was not aware of began to present themselves, to engage buildings and sites. So this place that is on the screen right now is an kind of an interfaith space. It's a space of collecting sacred music from around the world. So it's like you go there and you can kind of like I'd like to listen to some Christian music. I'd like to listen to some Zen meditation. I would like to listen to some Brazilian drums, and it's there, you know. So so I sat there for a little while and just listened. And then there's a meditation space, and the other, and down the hill from here is a stone, a very large stone, and behind it is the cemetery. And those things will figure into the rest of this documentation as we look at it. But what will follow is like the just my movement into these spaces. And again, all that was required was to make a document of it, and share that, you know. So so mostly what I had with me is just like a handheld like Zoom recorder, and a small digital camera to set up, and like and a tripod to image myself. These were walks alone. I just kind of walked by myself around, you know, and again, like asked for suggestions. So what I'm holding here are postcards. What I'm looking at are postcards that I had found on eBay of this town. You know, so I was like, before I went there, I was like, I don't really know much, but I'm gonna do like a sightseeing tour, but figure it out. So I just like went on eBay and was like, what can I find? And they have all these old postcards that had like highlights from Hamilton, you know? And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I found this place, not really knowing, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I'll just go to just go to some of these places that are the sites to see. Some of these places had, the postcards actually had like stuff written on them, you know, like especially like the sports areas, the sports arenas, like fans, like some dude who was like a fan was like, "We beat you, haha," you know. But anyway, I didn't go to the sports arenas, but I went to, you know, this particular this place, and it was interesting how it was imaged. There's a curtain here that pulls forth that can kind of like neutralize the room a bit, but the postcard that I saw had the cross image, but I think it's evolved in many ways, I think, for multiple uses, because I think it's the idea that, like, yes, an architecture does speak, and maybe it's all this change and thought needs to begin with architecture. Okay, so I'm gonna stop that one there, and switch it up. So, so that I think it's the thing to do is to go into maybe one more contextual piece, which is this one. So yeah, and then I'll go into the score. So this is the other, I guess, or another machine project piece that was, I guess, it could be a bookend of all this. You know, let's see if I can find it. Well, I guess I'll just play it on here. It's pretty much there. So this was a project that was done with Machine Project in 2000. Yeah, this is 2011. Called The Sky Above, and it was a part of the Los Angeles, it was an architecture biennial. So this was the Machine Project Field Guide to LA Architecture. So they had invited each artist to just pick a building in Los Angeles, and to figure out some way to engage it, and explore some of the histories of the site, and just document an engagement of it, and it would be archived. This is the Getty Research Institute, and so they invited Machine Project to invite artists to do engagements. So this is a bookend in terms of like the project, the Perfect Strangers project, there were some extremes, but it felt low key. It was like on foot, it was walking around and like interacting with folks. This was a different kind of thing. I thought it would be a much more of a walking tour, but it's Los Angeles. And what was happening is that in LA, I guess once you start kind of asking questions about sites, buildings, whatever, it starts to get into like this Hollywood mode. Like everything is really like real estate's premium. It was expensive to get access to the buildings that I was interested in checking out and the histories I was interested in checking out. So I had to kind of think of a way around that. And having kind of been in LA for a little while, and also not being from there, being from New York and just dealing with it, it was like, oh, this is like not really a vertical city. I come from a vertical city, New York. This is really flat. So I was like, well, what's up with the verticality here? You know what I mean? And which is downtown. So I don't know, I got kind of obsessed, or not, well, just interested. I wouldn't say obsessed, but like interested in that history. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna think about verticality. So I was like, what are the tall buildings and what's been the tallest? And after a little bit of a bit of a research, I was like, oh, the US Bank Tower downtown is like the tallest building in Los Angeles, and like I'm into that. But again, getting access to these buildings was tripped out, and I don't even know who came up with the idea, but it was in some kind of conversation. It's like, oh, you know what we can do? We could just like rent a helicopter and do it from the sky, because like, you know, they're vertical buildings. We could just check it out. You know what I mean? It's LA. It's like helicopter world. So it's like, well, you know, maybe that'll be like, haha, whatever. But then we did a little research, and it was like, that was the cheapest thing to do. It was like a helicopter tour anywhere in Los Angeles. It was like, I don't know, it was like $50 or something like that. You know, it's like, so we was like, okay, let's just all get in this helicopter and go and check out this building. And maybe we'll check out some of the other buildings that are tall buildings in LA at the time and do a recording of it. And meanwhile, I'll do a performance of some sort in it as well. And like, we'll go on a helicopter tour. So this ended up being The Sky Above, which there's an excerpt of it on this documentation here. It's an excerpt of a full hour-long recording of the piece. That's the document, but what you'll see here is a little bit of a preparation for the experience. So.
The flight plan is to go towards downtown LA and take a look at buildings that held the title of being the tallest building in Los Angeles. We'll be able to communicate through the headphones, and then you'll hear me through this omnidirectional as well. Yeah. And it'll hear like.
A lot of pools down there.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that piece, again, it was the machine project field guide to LA architecture. Then there's a series of performances that followed that. Jacqueline Gordon did a piece. I think there were maybe, I'm thinking 10, but there were many. But so I believe mine was the first in the series that Machine was doing. And so to get to the Trade Bank Tower, started from Van Nuys Airport and flew to downtown LA. And we're like, well, this is a performance. I mean, it's really like, how do you, well, I mean, we're inquiring into a site, we're thinking about a place, but it's like performing that thought and sharing that thought in a way that excites people about the possibilities of a city, like, you know, especially a city that is like, is growing and changing, is hard to get a sense of what your identity is, I guess, you know? So we performed this looking, the four of us. So it was myself, Bennett, and Jimmy Fazil, and the pilot whose name I cannot remember, but Bennett was, and Jimmy were sitting behind me in the video documentation in the chair. So we just were like, we've never been to on a helicopter, so we'll just like set up some chairs, and that was the gallery, that was the machine project space, to be like, this is what it would be like to be in here together. And so Bennett, you're gonna do this, and you know, we're gonna like perform this, right? So Bennett was gonna had a web link. We're gonna stream the whole thing with a what do you call that? Like a live cam feed from the helicopter with his like Wi-Fi card, and stream that to different locations in downtown LA. And then Jimmy's gonna like have his camera out the window, so he's gonna have the like webcam plus the like high definition, high res cam, and we'll take the doors off and we'll like get that image. Jimmy will run the like web link. I'm sorry, Bennett will run the web. Jimmy will do the camera. I'll do the sound piece that'll go through, which you were hearing. And so that sound piece was had an omnidirectional microphones inside of the cockpit, and just we're gathering the sounds from the wind, from the helicopter blades, and processing that through like Live or something like Ableton Live, to make this sound work that would be the narrative score to this kind of excursion that we were on. Because what happened was that the Bank Tower has been in a lot of movies. Do you know what I'm saying? So in doing this research, you were like, oh, that was on Independence Day where they blew it up, you know? So like, when I was being in LA and thinking about all these buildings, they were like, a lot of them have been in movies. So it felt like we're in some like action adventure buddy film or something like that. So anyway, it was like, we'll do the soundtrack to this, like this thing, which is, yeah, again, what you heard. So these are the kind of like bookends for this, this continued engagement with sites, landscapes, urbanscapes, listening and thinking about composition, like composing in relation to these. So it was like definitely, I mean, sound, I come from a sound background, or I've been working in sound, but the zone of like doing like it as a composition that could be in multiple forms was something that was like coming out of this. And in the series of videos that we'll look at was like applying these ideas of like, how do you perform with these places as material? So like listening to the place for like sonic material, looking or listening, deep listening for visual material and like interesting sights and whatnot. So I kind of, after having done it for a little while or worked through these, had come up with some, I guess, core principles to guide through these through these kinds of works, right? Things that would be a kind of a personal manifesto of like how I might go about engaging things that are pretty unwieldy and trying to make something, you know, even though that wasn't like a pressure to like manifest or make something, but it's like what's I'd like to figure out something that has like an aesthetic that communicates something of the feeling or the energy of like being there, right? So like making that video of being in a helicopter over downtown LA like had to have a vibe, you know what I mean? Had to have something that, and so how do you, what's the materiality of it? You know, like, cause I'm not interested necessarily in making like, and they're like action images, like anxiety images, action images, decision images, images that are open to interpretation. So, so this is the score. This is the guiding kind of principles to the ways that I've been thinking about doing this. So let's just look at this. And this is, some of you may be familiar with it, aspects. So stop that. So yeah, if, then, else, if. It doesn't want to stop. It's all right though. All right. Let's see what it does. Yeah, right, that's how that happens. So in computer science, conditional statements. So the project explores the if, then, else construct as a way to engage the human environment through the use of these constructs as a method to structure, score, improvised performance. So if, then, else, if is a series of actions for interpreters. The artist will facilitate workshops in which participants explore their personal reality constructs. The artist will collaborate with local performers who will perform scores based upon the conditional construct model. The artist will perform a sound work derived from physical event data gathered at project site. A network of sensors will be constructed at the project site to test air, temperature, ambient light, airspeed, water temperature, wave propagation, and the presence of radio waves. The sensor array constitutes the sculptural material to be installed at the site. A selection of project scores will be installed at UB Anderson Gallery. So as I said, these projects that I had shown you and similar stuff is what inform this PDF of ideas that was gathered through the kind of necessity of having an engagement with the Anderson Gallery. You know, it required it. I guess up until this point, having worked with like small, independent, like, you know, artist-run spaces, it wasn't really like necessarily that like what's the plan? You know, it's like the plan is we know each other. Hey, whatever. There's no plan. We just know the vibe, right? But this is, I guess, to navigate through through a network of folks who are interested in supporting and helping, but like also understanding how to participate. Do you know what I mean? So like, how do you even communicate participation in a way that's like open-ended and facilitate something? And it's not for like business purposes necessary, but it's for the business of culture, for the business of living. Like we're going to carry out together like a series of actions that's just like an intentional living space, like a LARP or whatever, like you know, like we're going to all play roles, you know, in this. And maybe I'll play the role of me, but like I'm going to play that role, you know. So everything about like how you score that, or how you think about that, or how you witness that in the terms of planning it, because like you're conscious of like that you're going there to like live for like a short period of time, and to like make it so something that's like a contemplative architecture of like people. Do you know what I mean? So it's like something of a memorable experience. So there's like, so that's like the structural aspect. But again, like having to say institutionally, like, well, what is it that will be the thing? You know, And the gallery ended up doing the catalog, which I showed a little bit of, which is the narrative, right? So I have this sensor array that's like a temporary sculpture. And then there's a little bit of other objects that I guess could be considered art objects, but essentially this is like the apparatus. The apparatus is this score, or this like set of ideas, this poem, this piece of concrete of like ideas to like handle. So one, if there's emptiness, then fill it, else imagine, else imagine. It is not empty. Fields, voids, monoliths, space, consciousness, now, image, sound, barrier, imagination, room, place, experience, boundary, time, echo, mediate, decay, blue, concept, coordinate, system, continuous, loop, direction, movement, solid, orientation, plane, territory, landscape, dream, red light, else, decay. If there is history, then express that history. There's none, else consider the land, else experimental geography, artists, art, space, their bodies, objects, and there is the emptiness in which these bodies have their place and in which they move. Yeah. Thinking of landscape in terms of movie, I'm forced then to treat landscape as dream, myth, history as culture. So this is like a way to like kind of not get stuck, just be like, all right, there's an expansiveness here. And even my assumptions that I don't see anything is like, there's something there that is actually there and is historical, like the earth itself. So like everything in between of like, oh, I see it and I don't see it, has to be bounded by the fact that there's this deep historical like document called the earth that's always there and present. So just, if you got nothing to think about, just think about that as like a deep history of the place that you're visiting. Also consider the land. If there's noise, then harmonic, else disharmonic, else echo. There's no noise, there's no silence, else echo. So this is for the people, some of the people, to engage in engaging people and like ways of being in places. And a kind of guiding principles of interaction. So consider the following: every man, woman, in his or her own particular way, is a scientist, in that she is always building up and refining theories and models about how the world works, so that he can anticipate events. So I'm like, all right, like working in public, all right, what's the thing? It's like, how do you know what to anticipate? Something I haven't shown here, I won't show, I don't have the documentation, but jump back. I was in an event, a machine project event at, it was the Santa Monica Glow Festival. And we were there early to set up our stuff. And when we got to this park, we realized it was a park that had a lot of like homeless, a lot of veterans and like folks who were there who's occupied the park and lived in the park and were in that park as like a place of being. And then this festival comes in and like the artists set up, like we're like set up and like displace that community and the rest of the community, like the Santa Monica, like people come down to the waterfront area to basically party and look at like light art, you know, that dazzled. And a lot of people are like taking drugs or on psychedelics. It's like a thing, you know, to go and do that. But we're setting up and this guy comes to us in a wheelchair. My friend, myself, and my partner, collaborator, Susie Poling, were there. Who came from who's in LA, and I came from New York, and we're there and we're setting up, and we have like all this sound equipment because we're going to do this like elaborate sound light thing. And a guy comes in a wheelchair and is like, can I plug into your outlet to charge my wheelchair, you know? And it was like, okay, so here's a situation where like there's like a whole city like kind of event going on, and there's like agendas, and then like what's happening is like there are people there that are being displaced by this event who are asking into like, how do I link into a necessity, a need, or the just like charging my wheelchair because this is where I'm at. And so that began a kind of deeper conflict around like access to that resource, and like I mean escalated into like, you know, I'm a veteran. Anyways, the point is that like all resolved, but like potential conflicts of like engagement, of understanding, and like how do you listen and deal with that, right? So like every man or woman is a scientist, building up and refining theories and models about how the world works so he can anticipate events. Like how do you move through the world with an anticipation of like how to engage, trigger or not trigger conflicts, or like move in peace in the public or whatever. These theories of the world are built up from a system of constructs that we apply to anything we put our attention to, including ourselves. We construe reality constructing constructs. What are your reality constructing constructs? What is your reality? Complete this statement. If I, then this will happen. Else this will happen. Else this will happen. Right? So like, how do you like, how do you get people to be conscious of that when like even your consciousness is like something that like is affecting you, right? So consider the following statement in relation to your set of personal constructs. At first glance, the fact that the arts and related aesthetic attitudes vary so widely from one society to another would seem to suggest that they are wholly learned or cultural in origin rather than also biological or natural. One can make an analogy with language. Learning to speak is a universal, innate predisposition for all children, even though individual children learn the particular language of the people among whom they are nurtured. Similarly, art can be regarded as a natural, general proclivity that manifests itself in culturally learned specifics such as dances, songs, performances, visual display, and poetic speech. Ellen Desayaki. So what are your theories about culture? How do your reality constructing constructs inform your theories about art and culture? All right. So my action one, seeing the world, build a network of sensors through it to discover the physical realities of the environment, construct an image of this reality based upon the performance of your reality constructing constructs. Express as, okay, so yeah, and these are little notes: air, water, earth, the electromagnetic spectrum, light waves, radio waves manifest as sound. Let's stop that share and get to the a longer piece of video. So all of this work or all this thinking or thoughts is like is connected to what I mean, a practice of listening, a practice of deep listening, a practice of engaging environments, being invited to various places to witness the experience, but to like have a deep engagement with the site. So the apparatus around that is like my own kind of thinking, which is the scores and like how I control that, but also you know, microphone arrays, sensor arrays. So in this pieces, the videos that you're going to see are recordings, video recordings, and audio recordings of these like extended listening events or moments, these compositions, right? So the first is a kind of experiment in radio broadcasting. So I've got a microphone array, an FM transmitter, and I guess 30 radios, and a computer with some software. And I'm taking the ambiance, like using like omnidirectional microphones, using you know, just a various array of like listening devices to gather sound information, atmospherics, process that through the software to I guess like play with reverb, play with delay, like expand it, contract it, like push it around, and then broadcast that out to the participants, folks that had radio receivers. So what they would be listening to is the sound of the environment that they were already in, but just processed through this transmission. And their cue was to explore and find the edges of that transmission. So that was at the Tang Museum. These are the grounds around the Tang Museum. The second piece is also a machine project piece. It's a documentation from a project that was supported by the Mellon Elemental Arts Initiative. And this was also a listening project that happened at Pomona College in the hills above that. For that, the sensor test or sensor array was a kite with microphones and video camera attached to it. And that sound was processed into the sound work that you'll hear in that video documentation. And the last stuff that we'll finish up with is documentation of the a bit of the preparation and then the performance documentation of the work that happened through the Anderson Gallery in Buffalo. And so that's about 28 minutes of stuff. So that'll carry us through until like opening up for questions and what have you. So, you know, I might skip around a little bit, but I think that we, you know, got just a little over 25 minutes of video to watch. So cool. Let's play that out. Unless before we go on, are there any questions or any thoughts? People seem comfortable, so we'll keep it moving. Great, thank you. Again, this is all, you know, I mean, these are also ways for me to kind of witness myself, you know, in my own body in these spaces. Because the idea of like being invited somewhere, right, is the sense of like, okay, here's this body, me, being there, and what does it mean for me to be there, right? It's not like neutral. Any architecture, any like space or landscape is like speaking and being spoken to by the bodies that like, you know, occupy. It's of consequence. Like, look at what the migrations of all human populations, you know, various populations to various parts of the earth does, you know, like one human being or many human beings going from one place to another isn't always the outcome. Can be many, many things. It can be quite violent, you know? So bearing witness to my being in a place, like actually documenting that has been somewhat of a challenge facing. And, you know, you see that in the first piece that that I showed. It's like, how do you be present, but then also like be conscious of documenting your presence, right? It's like two different. So it's like, and particularly when you're trying to facilitate some kind of work that's about being present, you know, about like listening or listening more deeply. Anyway, so my own body figures in much of this or all of this in various ways. So again, here we are at the Tang Museum. And so I guess this piece, the microphone array is height. With a GoPro. eventually continues in this way of watching. I find a bit of height. I find some air, and learn a little bit more about this landscape in terms of like where the like wind gaps are. Looking back at this footage, not knowing what to expect, and just I don't know, just really struck by the image of this landscape from above, you know, and the camera's sensitivity to the environment which it occupies in terms of like giving me a sense of being there, you know, which is a feeling that I get from kite flying. Like I do fly kites often and enjoy it, of having a connection to the object flying, you know, and that this is, you know, an analog connection, right? To or a control, but still it's me there and it up there, right? And so this piece, having to a certain extent like given me a sense of being there, and I don't know, got me thinking a lot more about these kind of aesthetics of watching myself and surveilling myself, in the sense of like how different this feels than say like a drone camera, and what are the different kind of concerns of like even finding such a place to do such a thing, that needs to be like in resonance with the conditions. Like it can't just be like I have a motor and electricity. So anyway, these like kind of actions or tasks, to set for myself to document, are again the context for my having been invited, I guess, there, and ways of thinking about being there and being in Buffalo. So I want to cut to that footage that begins at the end of here. And let's, yeah, I'm gonna try it. Okay, there's that area. So yeah, coming to this place with some sense of an apparatus. Sandra, I don't remember exactly how we first met. Maybe it was on the phone, but what to bring, how to listen, what the apparatus was going to be of the listening, and a kind of scheduling of site visits to come to some sense of an endeavor that would be a challenge for everybody involved, like outside of everyone's comfort level to a certain extent. So everyone's constantly questioning. So the partnerships that were set up were with some local kind of folks that could maybe help get access to places, sites, and equipment. And then the folks from the dance department, and folks from the symphony, to participate in these like dance and sound performances. So what you're going to see is like mostly what was located on the barge, because earlier we talked about like that was one of the conditions for being there, to like float down the river. And some of the preparation that the dancers who you watch perform went through, and then a lot of me working with Tra to kind of get the sensors all up and running. So what's on the boat, or my kind of apps setup, is mostly sensors that are getting like ambient water temperature and air temperature, water temperature. This is some hydrophones that are getting sounds from the river. There's a radio that is bringing that. There's a radio receiver getting local radio, and a couple of synths that I built that were gonna project sound along the river through these like Silo City, these like gigantic concrete like megaliths, and which really shaped the sound in an interesting way. But we'll watch some of that and then like open up for questions and whatnot about what we've seen here, what I've talked about. So yeah, it's about 10 minutes. All right, cool. Anyway, so this is like the setup. That's the kind of marine worker, the river worker guys that we they do welding and repair along the river, but that's who ended up lending us, or I guess they lent or loaned or rented the barge. So they're on there working. We're not wearing them now, but part of the issue that's going up is that we have to wear safety vests. We have to like have proper safety procedures on the boat. I'm walking up to look at the boat and the setup, to look at the safety vest. And so I have my own safety vest on, but I designed some special safety vest for myself and the dancers to perform with. So these safety vests were designed to be this like kind of signaling object that would reflect light and be like a kind of like a sculptural performative thing. So I'm walking up this plankway to go check that out, to see if the lighting is right to illuminate them correctly. On this walk, I believe I may burp on the way up the plank, so excuse me if I do. I think this is all, flip cam footage of me walking through there. So.
Of just the lines on
of just the lines on it.
okay.
Yeah. So like that's what.
But when the floodlight is on, you're gonna see them completely.
Yeah. So what I want to do is like get.
I think the strobe, you should have more strobes on. They should be faster.
Yeah. So we could do that, and then, or do they need to be on the down low?
The strobes?
Yeah, so that they bounce up.
Yeah, I mean,
you'll never know.
A couple of work lamps, like 150 watt on the deck.
Yeah.
How strong are the strobes? You know how many watts?
I don't know.
Because that sodium bulb is probably 5,000 watts.
Yeah.
That's really strong.
Yeah.
Does he need it? Is he required once he's in the water to use it?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay. All right.
No.
This is just stop that share. See if I can. Okay, that's a couple of these images that I think are quite expressive of I think it's the second binder. So let's just do that, and then we can open up for questions. Okay, yeah, great. So let's look at this one. And then we can open up for questions. So, so again, these are some of how the images kind of like read as stills. I think there's something of this kind of like transformation of having like multiple eyes, like multiple like machine eyes, but still like scenes of it. Do you know what I mean? So like there's something for me that was much, I don't know, I find these still images like as dynamic or more dynamic than the actual like video of it, you know. So that's something that was kind of an awareness of this, to see like how time can be described in a still image, maybe oftentimes in a much more compelling way than like any amount of like video that you're watching. So for me, these images really like captured the time aspect of it. And eventually what these are the images that became, I think, central to the art historical documentation, which is the catalog, you know. So let's maybe we can close with that, and then open up for some questions really quickly. So my future X. You know, so that's a little bit of like how these images, I guess, were produced, right? And you know, the circumstances of it. And then this is a little bit more of the context for what the exhibition was and some of the various sites and other folks who contributed to it. This is Tra's work, who you saw on the boat, who was really like super supportive and instrumental at making this happen. But I mean, this catalog, I guess, should be available to have a little deeper engagement with it. But you know, just showing these to you to maybe little like memories of time there. Or just like the larger context for what it was. I mean, I wasn't here for all this, but I guess somehow connected to these people and these things. And then the installation. So yeah, the vest, the safety vest, got installed with the rest of the stuff. Oh yeah, Wash Project, Silo City, Wilson Street Urban Farm. Cool. And that's it. All right. So I'm gonna stop share. Thank y'all. I don't know if there's any questions or thoughts or whatever, but happy.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Kamau?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Hey. Okay. Thank you. I want to just echo that and let you know that this is a good time for you to power your mics up and make yourself known. In the meantime, maybe I'll make a comment or a very broad question, I guess, if I may. I really appreciate kind of the way that you've kind of put all of these parts out there and built them together and given this sense of this site-based research and this kind of notion of using various media systems as kind of, I guess I would see them as almost extra sensory extensions of your experience of a site, if that's fair to say.
I think that, yeah, for sure. That's totally fair. It's like an extension of your sensorium in a, I guess, maybe in a McClone kind of way. And you know, to a certain extent of like their extensions of, you know, in a media saturated environment, you know, like tap into the various waveforms, but also to the deep listening of like sight and ways that you can, with your body physically listen and engage. Yeah. So so there's
I mean,
to that. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was even, oh, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, not even necessarily like McLuhan implies. It ends up becoming more about like integration of those systems, you know, like to your body, but they're like, you know, they just have a function for you to get to something else, which is like more about kind of more philosophical position in the world, it seems. And in that way, like, I think we get beyond being like fixated on like, you know, technologies and qualities of representation, and get into this thing that you were kind of describing in a way as like a citizen scientist, an artist as a citizen scientist, like that we're all a scientist, as you say, gaining insight through sensorium and through thoughtfulness. And so I guess cumulatively thinking about all those things, I was wondering if it's too broad to ask you to talk a little bit about your relationship or your kind of thoughts about improvisation.
Yeah, well, that is, I guess that's the thing about the reality constructing constructs is like, are you improv? What is the basis? What is it informing your improvisation? You know, so what are the habits of mind that you bring to your instrument, your body, yourself, your being? You know, and how do you challenge those habits of mind by like placing yourself in spaces of improvisation? Or like understanding your rhythm, keeping to that rhythm, honoring it, and allowing that to interact with other rhythms to have a kind of holographic construct, right? So those are the kind of philosophical aspects and the ethical aspects of like how how you prepare for the encounters, you know what I mean? And so working with partners who are going to like are open to improvisation, do you know what I mean? So it's like the partnerships that are necessary, the type of partnerships that are necessary for these types of projects are really about like you know, do you have some outcome already set in your mind? Do you know what I mean? And so part of it is like getting out of the way of an empty space. Like, because I can't see it doesn't mean that there's nothing there. So get out of its way and let it like reveal itself to you in the improvisation. So that's like the kind of being like quite responsive and yielding, you know what I mean, and having and bringing that to it, which I think is like part of the improvisation is like it's not necessarily about like how much space you occupy with your instrument or your like the sound of whatever it is, but like how you allow space for other aspects of that improvisational form to like manifest. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that's making space for is part of the improvisational because yeah, I'm improvising with like a vast number of unisons. Do you know what I mean? To like maybe speak in a harmonics kind of way. Do you know what I mean? So so that's how I'm coming to it.
Yeah, I mean, because you know what you just described, it implies like at some point it's not necessary in research to have feedback, but in your experience of sight and representation, at some point that is what's distinct from another kind of another form of research. What you do, there's some degree of feedback and redirection, you know, or just kind of like your responsiveness puts you specifically there. It becomes very subjective.
Yeah, I mean, this is what do you say? Trinman Ha speaks about it, like talks about it as speaking nearby, you know, in like her practice of you know, making like ethnographic films, you know, or like when you not speak about but speak nearby, which is improvisational. Do you know what I mean? It is a practice of listening and listening to your listening and being aware of like what the articulation, as in like whatever you put at, there's no distance that, or there could be a distance, there could be a way that you distance and the other, that which you encounter, and yourself and whatnot. So yeah, those are some of the kind of philosophical aspects of it for me.
I have a question that's related to Max's question. In the context of your practice, which kind of falls squarely within reality in real life, the messiness of real life, which you hinted at in one example where a man who needed to charge his motorized chair came up to you and, needed to have his, chair charged. And thinking about that example and thinking about what you just said, to be open to or make way for things to let happen in their way and to speak nearby. I mean, these are things that are not necessarily easy to confront in the moment of things, right? Like it's, and even though in principle and philosophy, we may try our best to kind of embody that theory in practice, when you're actually confronted with a situation, it's exceedingly difficult. So I guess this is a question of, and it's a personal sort of set of strategies and tactics that we all need to adopt. But in your case, how do you open yourself up for this kind of improvisation, or to be on the ground and to listen so that you can speak nearby?
Yeah, I think it's committing some time, and functionally it's just like most of these projects I've shown like had a good amount of months of just visiting and having conversations with stakeholders, people who are invested in, like, what does it mean to be invested in a project, financially, philosophically, emotionally. I don't know, there's like a lot of ways that, and so just kind of like work that out and see what everyone's kind of interests are, and to create like spaces of freedom, do you know what I mean? So that it's not just deal with agendas, do you know what I mean? Deal with like and to kind of weed through your own like agendas, and bear witness to them. But that amount of like time to research and then to say, okay, we're gonna then realize that within some constructs that you maybe set for yourself, a kind of like value system of like being somewhere, simple as like clean up, don't leave a mess, or whatever, like that kind of stuff. So that's been the process of learning, and I don't know, it hasn't even been like it's I wouldn't say that there's been like mishaps. I think there's just been like, how does something succeed? How do you set something up for success, which is like basically being aware of how your presence becomes a distraction, do you know what I mean? To like the goings-ons of things, and to like resonate with that, and just aware of like, and not just resonate with the frequency, do you know what I'm saying? And be there in the same way that you would hang a show in a room and be like, okay, that looks, I guess there are those challenges, do you know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. These are experiences set to like learn and think from. And so looking back on them, they're like, oh wow, like I can see, I guess, learning through that being like the was it wisdom sits in places, like going somewhere, being exposed to the history of that site by someone who has a deep kind of connection and understanding of it in the way that's familiar and friendly, as like a gesture towards like citizenship, and thinking about citizenship as like something to be developed and nurtured and cultivated, you know what I mean? And that's something we learn how to do. Feels like, oh, okay, yeah. And now more than ever, I think we have to kind of question how we are existing as citizens. So these are the things that kind of inform my like being in places and visiting places, and then ultimately like being in home, being in at places that I feel like connected to in that kind of way, right? So but yeah, I just I want to thank y'all for having me and checking it out. I mean, Max, you have my connection. I will be back. I will be visiting a class, I believe.
Yes.
A little bit more.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It definitely leaves me with a lot of things to think about, a lot of questions, and look forward to keeping our conversation going. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and of course, most of all, Kamau, appreciate your presence here and your work. And so, yeah, thank you very much for sharing with us. We will we'll see you all next Monday night.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Talk to you soon. Peace.
Okay. Good night. Thanks.
Good night.